Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. I think this is episode 18.
Oh my gosh, I can't think of 18 things to talk about, so I'm impressed right there.
It's happened over a few months. So episode 18, I wanted to do something a little different, so we're not going to be stitching anything out today, but I asked Annie to join me because we wanted to do a Mythbusters style, because Quilt in the Hoop is so different from traditional quilting.
It really is.
You can get beautiful outcomes either way, but it's very different. I think it's a little more forgiving, in my opinion.
It is.
So that's kind of nice. But we wanted to bust some of the myths that we sometimes see, comments or hear people say things, questions. Yes.
They're not sure. They think it's done. Because when you translate it from doing traditional quilting to doing it this way, there's a lot of differences. And
Yes.
so if you're coming from the traditional way, you probably have some questions. So we're going to bust some myths.
Myths, yeah.
Say that.
And Annie, I'm sure you all know this, but maybe there's one or two people that don't know. She is one of the co-founders of Hoop Sisters. So her and Linda, the two founders of Hoop Sisters, created this whole method to make a quilt.
We started busting myths 15 years ago.
So she's good at it. That's why I invited her on. So I jotted down some myths. That is hard to say.
It is.
I jotted down some that I wanted to talk to you about today.
Okay.
And we're just going to dive right in.
Okay. Do
it. If you are watching live, go ahead and say hi in the comments to us. And let us know you're watching and where you're watching from. We love talking to you guys.
Yep. Share it with your friends who maybe need to have a few myths busted.
Okay, so myth one. So if someone says, I've only ever done embroidery, I could never make a quilt like that, because you're making this in the hoop of your embroidery machine. And sometimes people go, well, I've only ever done embroidery or a little applique here and there. I can't do that.
It's kind of neat because it meshes those two worlds together, and it does it so seamlessly that it's like, I guarantee you the first time you do it, it'll be like, that was easy.
Yes.
You know, where's that easy button from the Staples store?
Yeah.
But it's super easy because if you come from the quilting world, and you've never done embroidery, I'm trying to think what to say here.
It's hard sometimes.
It is. But I think there's things, and we'll probably talk about it, some of the questions like traditional quilting, you're going to go, I have to cut this fabric perfect. I got to make sure my seam is exact quarter of an inch.
It's very precise.
It is very precise. I have to square up my blocks, toss all that away. That is one of the myths going from quilting to quilting in the hoop, that you just have to toss away.
Yes.
And makes it easier, actually.
And if I'm someone who I've only ever done embroidery, I might look at Navigator, this beautiful quilt behind us, and go, that I can't do that. That would be overwhelming to make. How do you do that? But it's not, because you're just doing it one block at a time. Right. And we've got all the digitizing includes quilting, piecing, everything.
Absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, if you're coming from embroidery, you basically, the only real difference is we may tell you to put down a piece of fabric right side down.
Yes.
And the raw edges even with the previous fabric. That's the only thing that you probably have never done in just regular embroidery. And then we have the machine sew the seam for you.
Yes.
And then you flip the fabric, and the whole instructions just tell you how. So we just tell you when to add the fabric, where to add the fabric, what thread to use. We tell you how to do everything. And before you know it, you can have a beautiful quilt like Navigator.
And all of these things remind me of our Facebook VIP group, and here on YouTube. We have videos from our Quilt in the Hoop 101 course that we are currently doing. So this past Wednesday, we just did our stitch and flip block, which is kind of what Annie was just talking about with how you're placing fabric right side down. So check that out, because we do a little demo in there, and you'll see exactly how that works.
Right.
So I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so myth number 2. The only way to make a quilt with beautiful quilting is to do it traditional style, where you're laying it out on the floor and taping it down, and you've got the layers.
Oh, let me
and
tell
then
you.
you have to hand stitch it. I started hand stitching one once, and I
Oh
never
yeah,
finished it.
I know. I did a whole cloth quilt too. That's what you were talking about. What you started.
Yes.
That was just all hand stitching in the layers. And I named it Never Again 1, just in case I decided to do it again. But it has not.
There's not a never again too.
No, there's never going to be a never again 2. But I will say that I don't care what age you are. If you have to clean your floor before you have to layer a quilt and find the floor space and move all the furniture to tape your layers down to do your hand quilting on it, or spend the money to send it to Long Armor and have them do it for you. The only other thing that you could do is do one of our Hoop Sisters designs, because the quilting is in there with it. So not only will you piece all your fabric in the hoop, possibly some applique on some of the blocks, but also you're going to add your backing fabric along the way. And it does all the quilting you see in all of our quilts is all done while it's in the hoop.
And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And so I think that as far as a price standpoint, it's a lot cheaper to get this that already has the quilting in it. And as far as an ease standpoint, you're sitting in front of your embroidery machine and you're just having it do the work for you. So I think that I love that part about it.
It's awesome. I remember, I have to share a little personal story. When I put together, laid everything out on the floor and taped it with the whole cloth that I started and never finished, I was probably 26 or 27 at the time. And I remember just sweating while I was doing it. It's a lot of physical work to do that.
Right. And your knees hurt, your back hurts, and you run out of tape, and then your dog runs across. I mean, all kinds of things happen.
Okay, number 3. And we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but there's very little wiggle room for error and quilting of any kind. So when you're cutting your fabric or sewing your seams, it has to be very precise. You have to have exactly a 1/4 inch seam. So what would you say to someone who told you that?
Well, I would say that is a true statement if you're talking about traditional quilting, because even just being 1/64 of an inch off in cutting or sewing your seam, if you add all the blocks together at the end of it, it can definitely change how your quilt turns out in the end. However, it is not a true statement if you're doing it quilt in the hoop.
Yep.
Because the machine does the stitching first and then the trimming, and the stitching always lands in the right spot. And that's the important part.
It's awesome. And I've seen too, people say and these are people who are used to traditional quilting, right? So someone might say, when you are trimming and you're using our Trimmer by George tool, that you have to trim exactly a 1/4 inch from the basting stitch. And you really don't even have to do that because you're not lining up the raw edges to stitch a 1/4 inch seam.
Right.
You are pinning and lining up along the basting stitches.
Right. Another myth busted. You're going to be, the basting stitch that sews while it's in the hoop is what you're going to be sewing your seam on.
Yes.
And like Sarah said, not a 1/4 inch from the edge. Makes a big difference.
Pretty cool. Okay, number 4. You'll have to use stabilizer if you want to do a quilt in the hoop design, and that's going to make your design or your quilt really, really stiff and crunchy. Yep. We don't like that.
Right. Nobody likes it stiff and crunchy. And I will tell you that in the beginning with Hoop Sisters, we did start out using a stabilizer in a really lightweight batting, and it was stiff.
Yeah.
But you do need to have stabilizer because it is embroidery, and sometimes there's a lot of stitches in our designs. But you also, of course, it's a quilt, so you need batting. And that is why we went to Quilter's Dream, and they have produced a product for us called Battleizer that we've had for, probably 13, 14 years now. And it's a combination batting and stabilizer. So, and it's real low loft, so you can hoop it really easy. It's the first step in our designs to hoop that. Sarah has a little sample of it.
And you can see how it just drapes.
Yep, it's very and thin, so it's easy to hoop. And it has the batting, but it also has a little bit of the scrim is still on there.
She's trying to pull it apart.
Trying to pull it apart. guess that's not going to
But
happen.
it's nice because it holds up. Oh, my phone's giving me a. It's nice because it holds up well to dense stitching.
It does.
But it's still lightweight enough that you get nice
Right.
drape.
Yep.
Now, if you're doing a design that has a lot of stitching in it,
especially the smaller blocks
Yes.
with lots of stitching.
yes, it's not going to drape exactly like that when you're done, just because of the amount of thread.
Mhm.
But with a lot of our blocks, with all of our blocks, the Battleizer is awesome. But when you're doing like a simple block of ours, it does still have a lot of drape to it.
A lot of
So
drape
it's
to
nice.
it. It is nice. It really is.
So no need for stabilizer.
That's right.
No crunch in your quilt.
That's right. No, I don't like crunching my quilts. You got another myth to bust?
I do. I have one more. I
Okay.
have 5. Okay, so this one says there's way too much bulk in the seams. If you're making a quilt block by block, it would never lay flat. How do you get rid of that? I can't imagine trimming that.
Well, you know what? Again, out of necessity, we have a tool that is called the Trimmer by George 3.0 because this is our 3rd try, and I think we got it perfect. So this was made and invented out of necessity of somebody who was trying to join blocks. It was Martha Orbank and her husband George. George actually invented it. That's why we named it after him. And basically, the George trimmer has a metal edge on it that you tuck under
This part.
that part there. So you tuck that under the fabric, between the fabric on the front of your block and where your battleizer is, and then you lay it flat and
Mhm.
use that metal edge to trim off the excess so that there's no bulk left in the seams. Then you sew them together right on the basting stitch like we mentioned, and then you can cover that with a thin sashing strip. And there's a marking on the ruler for the sashing strip as well. That's
Mhm.
almost harder to say than myth. So you want to tell them about maybe a free design that they
Yeah.
can download?
So if you get this, I don't have it with me right this second, but this is a trimmer case, and you can scan the QR code on the front, and I believe that will take you to where you can get the design to make that for free. So if you have a use for this, and you've got,
Yeah.
I've never done Hoop Sisters before though. We know a lot of people who use this for other projects as well. So if you grab this and you go, I want to try something like Hoop Sisters,
Yeah.
this trimmer case, which is free, is a great start for that as
And
well.
like you said, it's anytime you want to remove some bulk in the seams, you can use this
Mhm.
tool for that purpose. And there's 2 QR codes on here.
Oh yes, I showed them.
And
earlier.
the other QR code is a video that shows you exactly how to use it.
Yes, and if we're saying all this and you're like, what are they talking about? That video is right here on our YouTube channel. So just search for that and check it out. It's also on our website, and you'll get a nice demo of how to use this. I know we've demoed this a lot of times, so it's in a lot of places. So you can definitely find that.
So there's probably more myths out
Oh
there.
yeah.
So if you have a myth you want us to bust, put it in the comments and we will address it maybe at a later date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are all our myths for today. I do have one more thing to tell them.
What?
So this is episode 18. And episode 19 next week, I'm going to be doing a tutorial on adding a sleeve and binding onto your wall hangings. And I make a funny mistake in that video, so you'll have to watch that because I've already filmed that one. And then episode 20 will be the following week. That's April 14th. And that is going to be our season 1 finale for Sew with Sarah. So we'll have that finale, and then I'm not sure exactly when, but we'll be back for season 2.
We will. We will.
All right. Well, we will see you guys. Thank you for joining us.
It was fun. It was fun. Thanks
So
for
it's
the
fun to
invite.
do these things. And we will see you guys next Friday for the sleeve and binding tutorial. Have a good weekend, everyone.
All right. Bye.